And Shah. So today's session, the topic that we are covering is digital workflows for sales operations excellence. Just a little bit of logistics related information with respect to this session. We are hosting this on a Zoom webinar. So when you open your Zoom, you will be able to see a bar which has multiple tabs, including Q&A um, and polling and other areas, chat as well. So the session is about 1 hour long. We're going to keep the presentation part of it fairly short. We will mostly spend about 10 to 12 minutes on the really our observations about some of the challenges and pain points in intricate sales operations workflows. Following that, we will show at least our approach of how you could effectively address some of the coordination issues in sales operations. We'll be showing a demo of our solution and how it addresses various workflows that are interrelated in sales operations. The last section, we'll leave it for question and answers. So we are able to address any questions that you have. So the Zoom tab that I was talking about, Q&A. So obviously you can add your questions into that tab, Q&A. You can type in the questions. What we'll do is, as you keep typing, we will collect them, and towards the end of the session, answer all the questions. If there are any unanswered questions, we will communicate via email or some other means, maybe even set up a one-to-one session if needed to address in a more detailed fashion any of the questions that you have. With that, I will get started. Chemian Lab is a San Francisco Bay Area based company. We are primarily made up of people from several high-tech and automotive and medical device companies with significant expertise in new product introduction and supply chain. We do have offices in Boston and Detroit, and most of our customers range from Fortune 100 to even some of the smallest 20 people companies who use our solutions. Today, we are going to spend a lot more time on one of our key product, zFlow. It's a digital workflow for the modern supply chain. That's what we'll be using to demonstrate, how you can support sales operations workflows in a digital and effective, what we feel is a very effective manner. Okay. A little bit of background about the team, the panelists today. I have about 20 years of experience in NPI and supply chain, a lot of it with high-tech and automotive companies, but I also spent several years at SAP, managing some of the supply chain solutions. Hiren with me also comes with significant experience, 20 plus years in both finance, CRM, manufacturing, same background, automotive, high-tech, and software. So between us and the rest of our team, we are both practitioners of new product introduction and supply chain, as well as now creators of some of the more what we would think are compelling solutions for workflow management in the supply chain. Okay, so if you really look at it from a sales operations workflows, one of the things that we've observed, depending upon the type of industry company that you have, it is the longest running, most important workflow there is for a company, right? This is the one workflow which is made up of a lot of small workflows and overall operations within the company and the supply chain that generates demand, helps the company make the products, work with the supply chain to make and deliver the products, and satisfy the customer, right? So that you can get paid. So you can also consider this as a quote to cash process or lead to cash, whichever whichever place the overall process begins for your company. One of the things that is very important about this picture is that there are a lot of handoffs that happen. What you see as sales giving or requesting information within the company as a RFI or a sales inquiry or sales quote actually runs the entire internal operations, right? So there are lots of handoffs, pretty intricate overall process orchestration that actually happens here. The process itself, end-to-end quote to cash or lead to cash or order to cash, there are quite a few variations depending upon the type of company that you are, right? If you're manufacturing make to stock, it is just as simple as taking orders. But if you really look at even a slightest complexity in terms of some variations that are happening, customers first ask for certain types of requirements, it starts to get fairly complicated. Right? Same thing, if you're looking at software as a service, it may seem simple, but the immediately as the complexity of the product and service increases, it gets very complicated. And of course, the last set where you have both hardware and software as a service, there are a number of things that need to happen, especially orchestration of the supply chain, so that the product plus service can be set up, delivered to the customer, and it is up and running so that billing can start. So many variations of this process that you will encounter. One of the things that we have noticed, especially anything more than make to stock, is there are several barriers to seamless sales operations. Number one, this is pretty common, nothing that we have not many people have observed, is there still these barriers between functions, in terms of information flow, process flow, or same terminology in some cases. So that seems to be still pretty prevalent. In many cases, these different functions use different applications altogether. Sales has CRM, something that we'll see today. Operations as ERP and procurement and planning and logistics. And, if you're working with supply chain, there's something else altogether. So it tends to, different applications, have their own nuances. So there is, again, lost in translation issues. Another important thing is because sales operations is so cuts across the company and the supply chain, there's a good chance of missed handoff, right? A quote, when does it become an order and what the changes need to be. So there are a lot of handoffs that need to happen, and that needs to be well managed. And let's not even talk about master data, because master data shows up in every place here, and it shows up slightly differently in one place another. So inconsistent master data is also another issue that we have observed. And so as a result, there are several pain points. I would say three top ones are coordination issues. Second one is, there are a lot of what we call sub-workflows, which are somehow connected to the sales operations overall quote-to-cash type of workflow, but they are disconnected. And then, the issue of inconsistent master data, primarily around product, pricing, and customers. Right? All of these come together to make up, to support the overall sales operations. And today in the demo, we are going to be primarily working with Salesforce as a CRM solution, how people start the process there. And the next one here is, we're going to look at fulfillment primarily from an SAP perspective. But the picture, which is not uncommon, in a lot of companies that have disparate customer-facing and fulfillment systems are, it's somewhat, disjointed, to say the least, right? And then, everything is dropped in between. If you have a lot of workflows that happen by email, if you're more, software oriented, if you're this thing, they use Slack channels and whatnot. Somewhat chaotic, to say, if we were to observe it. And then, the fulfillment world completely runs in its own realm, right? So there is a brick wall, we would call it, between customer-facing systems and fulfillment systems. And that's something that we're going to see today. How do you effectively connect those two and all the workflows that come together? So we're going to use zFlow for that. And zFlow is increasingly becoming a fairly popular one, especially for intricate supply chain oriented workflows. And sales operations is one of the best uses of how we do it. There are a number of things that are integral to zFlow that make it possible. You can see what they are here. And zFlow also has a number of other application areas which make it possible, in our opinion, to effectively support sales operations workflows, especially around NPI and supply chain and master data, because those are, in fact, feed into sales operations in many cases. At least our goal is, for sales operations workflows with zFlow, we see that as, kind of breaking down those barriers, the functional silos, and handoffs are happening smoothly, and there is consistent master data that is flowing between all of these different processes and different systems. So that's what we're going to see today. The demo will start. I think I'll let Hiren now take over and explain the demo. Hiren will start at the top, how an account in Salesforce comes together and the next steps. And I will cover some of the collaborative quotes and supply chain inquiries and so on. So it'll be back and forth between Hiren. So he's going to first start with the Salesforce side of opportunity. Okay, Hiren?
Yes, thank you, Chris. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, so let me go ahead and share my screen, and you should be able to see the same diagram that Chris was showing. And as Chris mentioned, I'm going to start with the process flow as Chris has outlined. I'm going to start with there being a prospect in your CRM system. In this case, we are using Salesforce. And from the prospect, we'll quickly create an opportunity, and then we'll create a code. We'll add some products to it. And our objective is, how do we enable supply chain collaboration for this code? So then from here, from your CRM system, we'll initiate the supply chain collaboration activity. And I will then hand it over to Chris to demonstrate to you how that collaboration happens in zFlow. So I'm going to set up the upfront part of the process. So let me go ahead and get into Salesforce. And the scenario here is that we have a prospect account. This account does not exist in a backend system. In this case, we are taking the example of SAP. So it is a prospect account, Facebook. And this is already converted from a lead. I've not gone through the process of doing that. I'm assuming that the lead has already been converted into an account in Salesforce. And I'm going to start off at the point where I'm going to create an opportunity for this account. So I go ahead and I can create an opportunity, and I will put in the basic data that is necessary for us to create an opportunity. I'm just kind of going through the standard motions of Salesforce so that we can set up this scenario. So at this point, an opportunity has been created, and I'm going to now go into the process of setting up a code for this opportunity. There are no codes right now. I'm going to go ahead and say I want to create a new code. So this is a prospect customer, Facebook. We have created an opportunity for this customer, And now we are creating a quote for this customer against the opportunity that we just created. The scenario that we are setting up is that a Cisco server is being sold to this customer. So I'm going to go ahead and populate the quote with a couple of products. So I'm utilizing the CPQ, or the configure price quote capability of Salesforce, in order to do this. And I'm going to go ahead and add a product. The scenario is that we will not only add a product, but we'll also add an associated service. So I'm selling the Cisco C125 M5 rack server. So I, as a salesperson, have added this. It is $10,000. I'm also going to sell a service. So there's a one-time product and an annual maintenance service. Annual maintenance service is $100 per month. And the term of this quote is 12 months. So it's $1,200. At this point in time, I have created a quote with a couple of products, with the Cisco product and the annual maintenance service. However, in order for me to send this quote to the customer, I need to know which vendor will I be collaborating with, because there's a supply chain aspect to this that Chris will go into in greater details. And at a minimum, I need to know what the estimated delivery date is, so that when I submit this quote to the customer, I can mention that on my PDF or the email or the DocuSign that I sent to them. But since I do not know that, I need to initiate supply chain collaboration for the sales quote. So this is a point in time where now, if I go back to this diagram, I've finished the quote and I'm launching into the collaborative aspect of the quote. So let me go ahead and click this. And this is where it transparently, seamlessly launches into Zflow. It copies all of the information. This is the quote number. It copies all of the information into this code, and it actually executes a lot more queries and populates it. It does it all automatically, but in order for us to show it to you in a demo, we have not made it automatic, so I can show it to you. So this is a system activity which says get quote and quote line information from Salesforce. I'm going to do it manually by starting the process and showing you how this executes. So right now, as you can see, it is making a live connection to Salesforce based on the quote ID, and it has just pulled in all of this information. It knows what the customer is, the ship to address. It has pulled in the line items that I have on the quote, which is these two that I've just added. Now I'll hand it over to Chris, where he will show that now this information is available to us in Zflow, which is an exact replica of what is in Salesforce. We will now be able to collaborate. So over to you, Chris.
All right. Thank you, Hiren. So now that the quote is in Zflow, so we have a number of issues here, right? Firstly, we don't know what the delivery date is. That's required for customers. Unfortunately, this is not a make to stock type of environment where we can just pick from stock and send it, right? With some available to promise calculation. It is not, because this CU65 rack server is actually made by Jabil. So if I go and, as a matter of fact, look at that product, right? So we also have some of the, I'd say, composite master data in Zflow. One of the things that you will see here is, where is that UCS M5 server is actually supplied by Jabil. Okay. I mean, it's our contract manufacturer, right? So that's what we are going to be, kind of focusing on. So what I will do here then is look at the sales quote. So let me pick the correct sales quote here. I think this may be the one. Yeah, let me just.
And in
sales
this
quote
case,
that just came.
supplier information was available in Zflow That's how you know.
So this sales code is coming here. So let's look at, for timing purposes, we've already ran through a number of these workflow steps. So if you look at it, that sales flow has, once the quotes, everything came, there was a sales operations review, there was a sourcing review, supplier partners, and it was actually sent to a Jabel's response. So we're going to run through the workflow here. Some of the workflow steps have already been completed, right? As Jabel, one of the things that we have done, because this line item here is actually fulfilled by Jabel, we have actually gone ahead and created a workflow inquiry. This is related to this. So all it has is, from that original quote, we stripped off the item that Jabel is providing, with fulfillment perspective, and said, hey, Jabel, can you please, in this workflow, we are, Jabel is automatically invited as part of this workflow. So if you look at it here on the right is what, as a company, if you were to Cisco, you sent out an inquiry related to that quote, right? Now, this is our main quote, but here we are just separated that line item in the quote and said, Jabel, please send us your estimated delivery date. Jabel actually has, to the left is Jabel. It also shares Chris Korpati because Jabel is the user. Jabel is one of the suppliers in our system. So if I look at the list of suppliers, we've just have Jabel as one of the suppliers, right? And chris.korpati@gmail.com is one of the supplier Jabel participants. So you can seamlessly bring in suppliers as part of the workflows here, right? So that makes it a lot easier to just quickly hand off to your the suppliers and get the required information from the suppliers. So here, Jabel as a workflow step, they'll come in, and when they log in, they are required to send their supplier response. In this case, Jabel said, hey, our estimated delivery date is 2021-5/31, and the estimated delivery date into the sales quote has come in at this point, right? This is the delivery date that we have. And you can, if you have multiple suppliers, obviously you can, for the same order, some of the customer prospects that we talk to have, fairly large systems that are fulfilled by multiple partners. Then you're going to see multiple actual inquiries, quote inquiries going to different partners, and there'll be multiple sub-processes, sub-workflows here. So in this case, there is just one. And if you notice, the annual maintenance service line item doesn't have anything because it's an internal, it's not fulfilled by a partner, internally fulfilled. So there is no need to worry about the delivery dates. So once this delivery date comes back, the workflow gets finished and sends it back to the quote in CRM system, Salesforce here. Right. So with that, I'll hand the baton to Hiren, so he can now go ahead and look at, okay, now that we got the quote back with delivery dates, send the quote to customer, and obviously if the quote is accepted, we need to make this account from a prospect to a new customer. So that is a process that Hiren will start, and then I will show what happens as part of that process. Okay, Hiren, back to you.
Thank you, Chris. So as Chris just showed, we have completed the processes or the boxes that are highlighted in green. We started from a prospect, we created an opportunity and a quote. Chris showed the collaborative aspect with an external partner, in this case, Jabel, where they're able to log in and provide inputs. We're able to collaborate, gather that input, and now we are back into Salesforce. So I'm now here because remember, I need to send the quote to the customer. So if I come back to my quote and if I refresh it, the update from Zflow, which was one of the steps in the Zflow workflow, it comes back into this code. It knows, and if I were to look at this, it knows that the chosen vendor is Jabil. We may or may not share this information with the customer, and the estimated delivery date is what Jabil gave us. So at this point in time, the scenario is that we send the information to the customer. We are not going to show that particular piece right now. We could at a later time. And the customer has accepted our code, and the delivery date is in line with the expectations. So internally, we are now ready to close win this opportunity. So that is what I will do. And this is still a customer. Once we close win this opportunity, we need to create Facebook as a customer in our backend system, which happens to be SAP. So first of all, I'll go ahead and close win this opportunity since the customer has accepted our code along with the estimated delivery date. So now this opportunity is closed won, and I'm ready to convert this customer and create them or onboard this customer into our SAP system. So it's still a prospect, and I'm going to go ahead and click on the link new customer onboarding. This will spawn off another process in Zflow that will facilitate this process. So let me go ahead and do that. And it will create this process. Initially, when it creates it, it knows which customer we are creating the the account for in in SAP. Again, if you look at the workflow, the first two steps have been disabled or not been made automatic so that I can show it to you. So let me go ahead and start this process so you can see that any information that is available to us in Salesforce is automatically queried and brought in. So it is being brought in real time, and it just populated all of this information, the name, the address. So whatever information we have, we will carry forward with us, but there's a lot more that needs to be done that Chris will now cover. So handing it over back to Chris.
Okay, thanks, Hiren. All right, so Chris, Hiren initiated. So imagine you have your sales team using Salesforce. It could be Microsoft Dynamics too, because a couple of our customers do the same thing with Microsoft Dynamics. Now they have they got their quote approved. This is a prospect, not exactly a customer yet. And now that the quote is approved, you need to create this customer so that you actually can do business with them, ship goods to them, and the accounting information is appropriately captured in your financial system. Right? If you have any experience, with some of the financial ERP or billing systems, you know that there's a lot more information that is needed so that you can actually fulfill and satisfy customer needs, right? So you are typically looking at distribution channels, customer account groups. This is some of the terminology is with respect to SAP, but it's pretty similar in other financial billing systems, right? You're going to put the correct customer information. You may have to select the correct sales rep, or the sales rep can come directly from Facebook, and then there are a bunch of other master data related information that you have to include, before you can actually review, before you can actually create the customer record in your billing systems. And there could be multiple places you may have to create this as a customer. Your customer service, if you're using Zendesk, you need to set that up, right? And if you're in SAP, you also need to include, what are the different partner functions that are needed. So a lot more than just your vanilla, I'm going to go create a new customer. Now for that, what we allow is a full-fledged new customer onboarding workflow here. So if you notice, I got to move this away. Okay. We have before a prospect becomes a new customer, obviously, I think your finance and other teams, legal teams, would want to do proper due diligence. They might even set up standard credit limits or specialized credit limits if there are requests. They may actually even negotiate specific legal terms or just use the vanilla legal terms. All of these activities need to be done. And Zflow, as part of this Facebook onboarding, not only does it collect all the information and allow multiple people, right? You have all of these different roles to come together, and the actual people that play the role and perform all of these different activities as part of this workflow, right? So the new customer onboarding can be spawned off from Salesforce, but will be executed here within Zflow with people coming in and providing the required information. So here, for the sake of our time, I'll just go ahead and finish all of these activities. These are typically done by different people. Different people within your organization. There are lots of checks and balances. Sometimes we connect to DNB and do some checks for the customer record, so on. Right. So this is a classical new customer onboarding type of workflow. We'll go ahead and create it, and I'm going to approve on behalf of the finance, and the customer is now actually going ahead. We'll go ahead and create the customer in SAP. So now Hiren will show the SAP field and then go back to the quote becoming a sales order. Right now the customer is created in SAP. Our goal now is to be able to place the order and take that quote, convert the quote into a sales order, and then from a follow-on perspective, we're going to look at various fulfillment processes that will happen. So at this point, the customer will be, Hiren will pick up and show how the customer is created and what happens from a sales order perspective. And sales orders can be either, once the quote is finished, it can automatically create it, or there can be a mediation depending upon how much supply chain collaboration that you need. And that's something that I will show in short way after Hiren is finished showing the customer master in SAP. Okay.
Thank you, Chris. We are covering a lot of ground. We are going across various systems, so please feel free to ask questions as we go along in the chat. We'll certainly be answering the questions live as well. So going back to this process flow, Chris just finished the customer onboarding process in Zflow, and I'm now going into the SAP system, which is this right here, to see that the customer in fact did get created. All of this is happening without any need for middleware. We make direct calls to SAP using standard BAPIs. So I'm going ahead into the SAP customer master, and I'm seeing that this account record has been created. Information that was collected upfront in Salesforce has been brought over. But as Chris mentioned, there is several other pieces of information that need to be collected as you go along, enriching this data and do it as part of the customer onboarding. So all of that information processes have been completed, and this customer record has been created. And subsequently, now that we have the customer record created and we have the code already accepted, the next step is for us to make sure that the sales order is created transparently in SAP, and we see that this has already been created. So I'm just bringing up the sales order for you to review. So this is the sales order for this customer Facebook that we have created just earlier, and it carries the same information which was on the quote in Salesforce. However, if you can see, it does carry a little more granular detail as compared to the quote. So it not only has what has been sold for $10,000, but from a fulfillment standpoint, it knows that it is comprised of memory and a AMD processor. So this was information that was expanded via Zflow and brought into Salesforce. So to summarize, we have now started our journey in Salesforce. We have done collaboration in Zflow for not only getting the estimated delivery date from the vendor or customer onboarding, but we have also now created a new customer in SAP, and against that, we have created a sales order. So I will now hand it over back to Chris to talk about what happens from this point onwards.
Okay, let me show that. Okay, so you're Cisco, and you actually have the order, right, from Facebook. So the next thing, obviously, is now this is where rubber meets the road. These are fairly make to order type of environment. So you now need to give this order over to your contract manufacturing partners. So one being Jabil, and this being a server with quite a little bit of software requires to be installed, integrated, set up into Facebook systems, right? So we have manufacturing partner, and we also have a systems integration partner, right, to do all of this work for you. Now, if this were to be all internally managed, it would be pretty simple. You would just go ahead and issue work orders to people, and it's all done, right? Manufactured, shipped, distributed, sent over, and people will go there and whatever self-service or your internal consulting implementation teams will go and set it up. Unfortunately, it is not the case here. So the sales order that that Hiren just showed. So what we are doing now is use zFlow to actually do the fulfillment orchestration, right? So this is what we have. One, we need to issue a subcontract POs to 2 companies, right? So what we have done here is issue a subcontract purchase order to Jabil. Okay. And you go back to the other one, and then the subcontract contract to Deloitte, so that we set it up. So these subcontract POs, depending upon how well you set up your financial systems or billing fulfillment systems, they can be generated over there. Or in some cases, what we have seen, some of our customers that we are working with, they do not quite have the definition there. So they are using zFlow to create these or initiate these subcontract processes. The other thing that you will also notice is once those 2 POs are done, you can also keep track of how well things are being done using something called a fulfillment workflow. So if you look at the fulfillment workflow, it'll include the assembly and installation, asset install, all of the different activities that either you, your partner, your contract manufacturer, systems integration partner, all come together and do it. So these are all now created as part of this sales order workflow, right? So if you want to really get a good look at how everything happens after the sales order request, you can see it here, right? This is the sales order. We have 2 subcontract POs, and then there is a fulfillment process that will happen. So this, when we say there is a orchestration and there are a lot of these sub workflows that happen, this is exactly what we are talking about. So now, once the sales order is released, you as a company can actively collaborate with your subcontract manufacturers and ensure that the fulfillment is actually going to happen, and you have complete visibility, especially if this is being done by others. If your subcontract companies are going to be coming and doing this, you can actually create this workflow, and they will be joining here in this portal that is being set up by zFlow for their activities, right? So they can log in when subcontract partners or SI partners join in. They have their own launchpad, and they'll actively participate in any of the workflow activities that are being given. It's fairly secure and only limits them to activities that they can. For example, let me show you this thing. There is a supply chain inquiries for sales quote process here, right? Or something, it is a child of this overall quote, but they are not part of this quote. So they try to select it. It says you're not a participant of this. So, there is quite a bit of security that is set up here so that, people don't go run into each other. So the actual execution from a sales order perspective and all of this will be done as these related workflows that'll happen. This is still being set up. So, we have some of the information that is coming together, right? And once we start the workflow, this actually takes over now, right? So it is right now, I gave all of the activities to myself, but this assembly and installation can actually show up in Jabil's activity list here. And then the software as a service positioning will be done internally here, right? Billing and renewal setup is done internally. Consulting engagement may actually go to Deloitte. So you can completely control or at least coordinate. We wouldn't call it control, but you should consider it as a coordination between multiple parties, that come together and fulfill this order. So if you notice from an overall flow perspective, we really started off at the quote. The quote that was created in Salesforce. And if you look at the complete picture of what happened, right? In the quote stage, we are actually able to get some preliminary information from Jabil so that we give an accurate estimated date of delivery to Facebook. If you think about it, that's something that is very, very hard to do right now in a timely fashion. Even if you were to do it, it would be just a lot of emailing between the sales team, the operations team, the suppliers, right? So this is a very, very seamless, easy way to close that loop. And you definitely want that advanced information, right? If you are a subcontract supplier of Cisco, just the fact that you actually have some visibility into what is being quoted. People talk about supply chain bullwhips. This is actually giving them advance notice. Hey, this might, as a 50% probability, this quote will be closed and you should be ready to fulfill this, right? It comes, we've actually onboarded a new customer as part of this seamlessly. And then once the sales order came, we issued 2 subcontract POs and started a fulfillment fulfillment process to completely finish off until the customer is fully serviced and all of the other steps are taken, right? The customer signs off. So, we see this as a much more, elegant way of handling, what we would today are disconnected sales operations processes into one, seamless, you can call it quote to cash, or, if it is even a little bit ahead. Primarily, I think this need comes when the quotes start to being issued to customers or new customers or prospects or existing customers. There are several benefits from this. We definitely think this advanced engagement, operations, and sales can be very beneficial from a readiness perspective. Second is there are no drop-offs. The one process leads to another, and there's full visibility. Third is, we do have consistent master data flowing, right? Whether it's products or pricing or costing, it goes through, and obviously everyone knows when things are getting done. Okay. So with that, what it will do is stop the thing, take a few questions, answer a few questions, and go into a little bit of detail based upon the questions of various aspects. So let's look at any Q&A. Okay, so there is a question on does it support multiple environments? Because one of the things that we've seen is people have multiple manufacturing systems, different regions, and even supplier portals that are set up, or CRM systems that are different from Salesforce. Yes, we do support any many CRM systems, several ERP finance systems, like in addition to SAP, we also support Oracle or NetSuite. From a CRM perspective, we also support Microsoft Dynamics. Actually, they're all a lot easier to connect to, and and most of the integration does not. All of the integration here is done as part of the workflows. So if you look at the new customer design, the new customer onboarding workflows, let's look at new customer. So the graph, the overall process looks like this. And within this workflow design, what we do is very simply add the step to go ahead and create customer master in SAP. Right? Once that is done, we have the customer number. So all we have to do is then go and update the account, which is in the prospect stage. It's been converted to customer, but they don't really know the actual customer number used in finance and billing, right? So these workflow steps happen automatically as part of, it's nothing, nobody has to do anything, no integration, separate integration solution needed. The workflow engine just calls and uses the information that is part of within this workflow, right? All of the information that is available is used to create or update different systems. Okay. While more questions are coming, one of the things that we do recommend, if this is of interest to you, is we have two programs. One is called Test Drive zFlow, which is a 60-day trial that you can use zFlow, run zFlow, and connect to your systems and design your own workflows and use what is available. Completely, gives you full control over how you want to do and what you want to do. So it's for 60 days. That's a trial version that we can provide. The second one is also something very popular with our most of our customers came through this free proof of concept. They actually have a challenging situation within the company. And what they have come to us is say, can we see if zFlow can do this, right? And what we then do is actually design that process or whatever challenging situation that they have within our test drive environment. So it's something very specific to what you have. We help you design. In some cases, our customers also participate in the design and development process. So it's actually essentially you're primarily designing the workflow. We'll help connect you to if you have any external systems. But it is what you can actually use after that POC. It's almost as good as that. If that's something that is more appropriate for you, we can support that as well. Okay. Any other questions? So if you, this is something that we have seen a few other places around life sciences and pharma, where there is quite a bit of contract manufacturing that happens outside of high tech. That's one other place where we see a lot of contract manufacturing. So you can integrate quite a bit of quality management and other types of internal, workflow steps and activities and tools as part of this workflows themselves. A number of other tools that are including, especially if you're working with suppliers, are around quality management related issues. Also, you can do a little bit of supplier risk assessments and so on. As your supply chain partners are working to fulfill sales operations, you can do a number of those activities as well. Okay, so if there are no other questions, feel free to email us. One of the things that we'll do right after this session, once the recording is available, is we send out the recording as well as the presentation to the participants, registrants. You will have our contact information in that. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we will answer them back via email or as a one-on-one call. Okay. With that, we'll go. Thank you for taking the time to join this session. We look forward to seeing you in another future session. Thank you.